What if one tiny mistake, a single misplaced letter, could erase hours of grueling work and cost you your job? And what if this paralyzing fear, this everyday pain for millions, became the foundation for a billion-dollar empire? Imagine a sound. Not music, not the bustling symphony of a city, but the relentless, rhythmic clatter of a typewriter. It echoed through every office floor in 1950s America, a mechanical heartbeat accompanying thousands of women whose fingers flew across keys, churning out contracts, documents, and letters. Then, a sudden, sharp halt. A tiny click, a typo. One single letter struck incorrectly. For many women of that era, that click resonated like a gunshot. It meant disaster. In a world where legal and financial documents tolerated no strike-throughs or smudges, a single typo meant an entire page had to be retyped from scratch. Hours of grueling labor, frayed nerves, reprimands from superiors. The men who ran these offices often dismissed it as women's fuss, just a slow secretary. But for the women living in this hell of incessant typos, it was a daily, debilitating stress. This isn't just about a correction fluid. It's the story of how one woman, without even a high school diploma, saw a solution where IBM scientists had failed. Her invention, fitting into a small nail polish bottle, forever changed the rules of work for the entire office world. Today, we delve into the extraordinary life of Bette Nesmith Graham, a woman who didn't just invent liquid paper, she literally rewrote the script of the workday. This is a saga of quiet genius, unyielding perseverance, and how one woman's brave vision illuminated a path where others saw only darkness. It's a tale that began not in a corporate lab, but in a small Dallas kitchen, driven by the quiet desperation of a single mother trying to make ends meet. Let's set the scene. The mid-20th century American office. Picture rows upon rows of desks, each one anchored by a colossal, noisy typewriter. The air was thick with the smell of ink ribbons and carbon paper. Every keystroke was a commitment, a definitive mark on the page. In this environment, perfection wasn't just admired, it was absolutely demanded. Especially in banking, legal, and financial sectors, a single mistake was a major setback. There were no undo buttons, no digital backspaces. If you messed up a word, or even just one letter on a crucial document, you often had to start all over again. Imagine the pressure, the constant anxiety humming beneath the surface of every workday. It wasn't just the physical act of retyping. It was the wasted time, the sense of failure, the fear of judgment from male bosses who saw these errors as personal failings rather than systemic issues with the tools provided. Then came the new IBM electric typewriters in the early 1950s. They were heralded as technological marvels, faster, more powerful, producing incredibly crisp, bold print. But with greater clarity came greater scrutiny. Every mistake, no matter how small, became glaringly obvious, practically shouting off the page. This technological advancement, meant to improve efficiency, ironically amplified the stress for the typists, making the old problem even more agonizing. These machines, far from being helpful, felt like instruments of torture for those who weren't perfect typists. And frankly, who is a perfect typist, especially under constant pressure? Our story truly begins with Bette Claire McMurray, born in 1924 in Dallas, Texas. Her father was a car salesman, her mother an artist, a detail that will become incredibly important later. Her family wasn't rolling in money, but they weren't impoverished either. However, one event decisively shaped her future. At just 17, she dropped out of high school. In post-war America, especially for a woman, this was almost a life sentence. Her career path would be severely limited, often pushing her towards low-paying, often thankless roles. She quickly found work as a secretary, a young woman who, ironically, could barely type at first, trying to survive in an office where speed and accuracy were paramount. Her employer, perhaps seeing a spark in her, sent her to typing courses. Bette studied diligently, dedicating herself to mastering this new skill. This was her first lesson in perseverance, a trait that would define her entire life. She was learning to make her fingers fly, but the mental toll of the errors remained. In 1942, she married Warren Nesmith. That same year, their son Michael was born, a son who would later become famous as a musician in the Monkees. But happiness was short-lived. Warren went to war, and like many wartime marriages, theirs crumbled under the strain. In 1946, Bette divorced, becoming a single mother working as a secretary, often taking evening classes to try and earn her diploma. She faced constant financial fragility, every penny counted, and there was absolutely no safety net. One wrong move, one unexpected expense, and everything could collapse. In the office, she was often perceived as merely office hands. An appendage to a typewriter, her work considered purely technical, devoid of intellectual value. Yet, Bette knew her mind was capable of so much more. She saw problems, and her artistic eye often saw solutions where others simply saw walls. Then came the early 1950s, bringing those new, unforgiving IBM electric typewriters into the offices of Texas Bank and Trust, where Bette worked as an executive secretary. For her, these weren't just new machines, they were relentless taskmasters. Faster, bolder, and making every mistake scream louder. Bette, by her own admission, was not a perfect typist, and in banking documents, contracts, and legal papers, no crossouts were allowed. Every typo meant hours of retyping, hours she couldn't spend with her son, hours that incurred her superior's wrath. Every clack of the new IBM was the sound of an impending problem. She felt cornered, trapped by the technology meant to make life easier. But Bette was not just a secretary. She was, as we mentioned, an artist at heart, having inherited this gift from her mother. She was a natural observer, a quiet problem solver. One day, she was watching artists in the advertising department at the bank. They were correcting mistakes on large posters, not by erasing, but by painting over them with white tempera. They simply painted out the error and then painted the correct image over it, making the mistake vanish as if it had never been there. In that moment, a simple yet utterly brilliant idea clicked into place in Bette's mind. It was a thought so elegant, so practical, it seemed impossible no one had thought of it before. If an artist can correct a brushstroke, why can't a secretary correct a letter? It was a profound realization. If a problem couldn't be solved by preventing errors entirely, it could absolutely be solved by correcting them, cleanly, invisibly, as if the mistake had never happened. This wasn't about erasing, it was about covering up, a much more effective and less damaging approach for typewritten pages. That simple idea ignited a fire within Bette. She brought home white tempera paint, eager to test her theory. Her small kitchen in Dallas, after her son Michael had gone to sleep, became her secret laboratory. Night after night, she mixed paints with various solvents, searching for the perfect formula. It had to meet several crucial criteria. It needed to dry quickly so she wouldn't waste precious minutes at work. It had to cover the error completely and seamlessly, and it couldn't crack or flake when typed over. It was a delicate balance of chemistry and artistry. Her kitchen, usually filled with the smells of cooking, now reeked of paint and chemicals. Weeks turned into months of patient, persistent experimentation. She would make a batch, test it, tweak it, and repeat. Finally, she found a formula that worked. She poured the first batches into empty nail polish bottles, attaching tiny brushes to the caps, perfect for precise application on a single letter or word. She labeled them by hand, simply, directly, "Mistake out." Bette started using it secretly at work. When she made a typo, And she often did. She would quickly paint over it, wait mere seconds for it to dry, and then retype. Her colleagues soon noticed something remarkable. Bette's documents, which previously might have had visible corrections or necessitated retyping, now looked perfectly clean, pristine. "Bet, what's your secret?" they'd ask, intrigued. "Give us some of that stuff." From a simple desire to save herself from reprimands and the soul-crushing late-night retyping, a product was born. It wasn't an abstract business idea concocted in a boardroom. It was a practical solution to a very personal, very real, and let's be honest, a very female problem in the workplace of the time. It was a product born of necessity, by someone who deeply understood the need. The enthusiastic feedback from her colleagues gave Bette the confidence to think bigger. What if this wasn't just for her and her immediate co-workers? What if it could help everyone? In a bold move, she wrote to IBM headquarters, offering them her idea. Here was a company famous for its typewriters, yet they had no solution for the inevitable errors they created. The reply from IBM was polite, but ultimately dismissive. They essentially rejected her, failing completely to see the immense potential in her simple bottle of white liquid. But Bette, having faced far greater rejections in life, was undeterred. This wasn't just a product. It was her solution, her escape. She made a fateful decision. "I will sell this myself." With that declaration, the Mistake Out Company was born, a tiny business registered in her name. Her Dallas kitchen became not just a lab, but a mini-factory. Evenings, after her shift at the bank, she and her young son Michael, along with his friends, would pour correction fluid into bottles for $1 an hour. It was a true family business, built on faith, perseverance, and the belief that this simple idea could make a difference. She began calling and visiting local stationery stores, offering samples of Mistake Out. Again, she faced skepticism. "Why do we need liquid when we have erasers?" they'd ask, missing the point entirely. Erasers left smudges, tore paper, and often made the mistake worse. But Bette was persistent. She knew the product worked because she was its first and most demanding user. She understood the problem better than anyone. In 1956, after years of development and initial sales, she patented the formula, protecting her invention. In 1957, she wisely renamed it liquid paper. A simple, clear name that perfectly described the product and was easy for everyone to understand. The turning point came in 1958 when the authoritative journal The Office mentioned her product. This exposure brought the attention she desperately needed. Soon after, the corporate giant General Electric placed a large order. Sales surged, and Bette's little kitchen operation couldn't keep up. By the late 1950s, Bette's growing business became an open secret at the bank. Her superiors eventually discovered she'd been developing her company on company time, a common accusation against innovators who juggle their side hustles. They gave her an ultimatum: the business or the job. Without hesitation, Bette chose the business. It was a monumental risk, leaving the security of a steady paycheck as a single mother, but she had unwavering faith in liquid paper. In 1958, she formally established the Liquid Paper Corporation. What began in her kitchen soon needed dedicated space. In the 1960s, she opened a small factory in Dallas, initially with 19 employees. They bottled hundreds, then thousands, then hundreds of thousands of bottles. The demand was insatiable. By 1967, liquid paper was generating over $1 million annually. By 1968, over 1 million bottles were sold. And by 1975, a staggering 25 million bottles per year were being sold in 31 countries around the world. Competitors like Whiteout emerged, trying to cash in on her success, but liquid paper, thanks to its superior original formula and Bette's relentless drive, maintained its dominance. The former secretary, who struggled to type perfectly, had become a true industrialist, a self-made millionaire, yet she never forgot where she came from. In 1975, Bette opened a new headquarters and a sprawling 35,000-square-foot factory. But this was no ordinary factory. It was her manifesto, a physical embodiment of her values. The campus featured green areas, a tranquil pond, a library, and, revolutionary for the time, a dedicated daycare center for employees' children. It wasn't just a factory, it was a campus where people could work, learn, and grow, a place designed to support the whole person, not just the worker. Influenced by her faith and her own experiences as a working mother, she wrote a statement of policy, an internal manifesto that prioritized product quality over sheer profit, championed decentralized decision-making, and most importantly, emphasized respect and care for employees. She was deeply convinced that women brought a unique blend of caring and humanism to business. Her employees were not just cogs in a machine. They had access to a credit union, training programs to advance their skills, and a generous pension scheme. For the 1960s and 70s, this was almost utopian, an early example of a truly human-centered company long before the term became corporate jargon. In 1962, Bette married Robert Graham, who joined Liquid Paper and helped her scale the business further. However, as the company grew, tensions arose, and Robert pushed for greater control. But Bette, having fought for every inch of her success, maintained strategic authority. By the time they separated in 1975, she retained 49% of the company and a controlling stake in the voting rights. The divorce, though personally difficult, did not destroy the business. In 1976, net profit reached $1.5 million with products sold in dozens of countries. By the late 1970s, Bette's health began to deteriorate. In 1979, after years of hard work and incredible success, she sold Liquid Paper to the Gillette Corporation for a staggering $47.5 million, approximately $170 million in today's money. The deal also included royalties on every bottle sold for another 20 years. A woman who had dropped out of high school, started her business in her kitchen, and faced countless obstacles, had become one of the wealthiest self-made entrepreneurs of her time. Bette Nesmith Graham died in 1980 at the age of 56, leaving behind a legacy used by millions worldwide. Liquid Paper passed through Gillette to Newell Brands and is still sold today, a testament to its enduring utility. Her impact extends far beyond just an office novelty. She fundamentally changed the daily lives of tens of millions of secretaries, students, writers, and anyone who used a typewriter or pen. A typo ceased to be a catastrophe, a career-ending error. As she herself said, her invention was like a paperclip or a rubber band. We don't know how we ever got along without it. Bette became an undeniable inspiration for women inventors, especially in the often overlooked low-tech sphere. Her story proved that innovation doesn't have to be a rocket or a microchip. It can be a simple, elegant solution born in a kitchen, solving an everyday pain, and still growing into a global business. Her corporate culture was a prototype for modern, progressive companies. The daycare, the library, the employee participation programs, these were revolutionary ideas. She showed that a company could thrive while treating its workers not as disposable commodities, but as valued family members. And perhaps most profoundly, Bette became a symbol of invisible women's work. Her story is a perfect metaphor. For decades, women like her quietly corrected the mistakes of men and the system, receiving little to no recognition. Until one such woman decided to charge for it, and in doing so, turned that invisible labor into tangible capital, into a massive, undeniable success. Today, Her name might not be as widely known as the great fashion moguls or tech titans. But every press of the backspace key, every time we correct a mistake on a screen without retyping the entire text, is a silent echo of Bette Nesmith Graham's simple idea: a mistake should not destroy the entire page. This powerful concept didn't come from an IBM laboratory or a corporate boardroom, but from the humble kitchen of a single mother in Dallas. Bette Nesmith Graham proved that great inventions don't require a degree, only the courage to see a problem and find your own, often very simple, way to solve it. If you found Bette's story inspiring, make sure to check out our next video for more tales of unlikely innovators.